Hey crew, quick tips. Today we're talking about the different layout types available to us in the new responsive editor. We have fixed, aligned to parent, row, and column, and what the heck do these mean? So let's start with fixed. It's an absolute value, and the children of this container don't care about each other. Okay, so let's put this one here, and let's put it at a top of 14 and a left of 16, whatever, and let's load this page. Now we have a maximum width of 500 and a minimum width of 500 because it's fixed, and a height of 500. And this one, again, is fixed and has 168 by 168. Okay, and that's exactly what we're going to get here, 168 by 168 with the top of 14 and a left of 16, regardless of the height of the viewport, it's fixed. When do we use this? Usually when you have a small widget that will always look the same, maybe an icon, something like that, that when you click there's a drop-down menu, and we're going to be doing some later on in the channel, actually next video I think, for the navigation menu, but the container layout fixed will make sure that this is never changes, basically is fixed. Okay, easy to understand. Let's not get too much into it. The only time it's different is when the height is set on the page. It's actually going to occupy 100% unless you have a minimum of 500, and then you'll be able to scroll until you reach that 500. Okay, this one will always be 200, and if it's too small, you'll be able to scroll, right? Makes sense? Cool. This guy is unaware of this guy and doesn't care about it because these guys will always be the same distance away from each other under fixed. But what happens if we pick align to parent? Now, align to parent is a responsive for the container and allows these groups, even though they're not aware of each other, to position relatively to the parent. So this one we want always sticking at the bottom and on the right, and this one at the top and on the right. We're going to remove, for this example, the min height, or go to 200 instead, and you see, okay, 32 off the top and now 32 off the bottom, but they don't really care, and they don't know about each other either. So the top group can eventually overlap the bottom group in this setting, but you can anchor your different groups to different positions. And that's useful for, let's say you're trying to make let's go layout. Instead of fixed, let's go align to parent on group A. Let's stick it always to the top. And instead of fixed width, we're going to let this one take up all of the room possible. So 100%. And the min height will also be 100%. Okay. And if you want to lock it to 100% and allow vertical scrolling, you could do that too. You could uncheck the content. There's a few other things you could do, but just quickly, let's make a pop-up by centering this one on its parent, right? This one is always 100% and this one is centered on its parent. We're going to give it a background color so we can see what's going on and hit the preview button. Oops, let's not do that. Let's just refresh here. And there you have it. Little thing to maybe explain. Debug mode gives you padding, and you get this message here. If you want to get rid of it, just get rid of that debug mode. And you have this guy here, and responsively, it should always sit exactly in the center of its parent container. So this you can use to build pop-ups, to build different things where you need it to align and not be aware of each other and manually calculate widths and heights and get a pixel perfect design. I use it especially in headers or places where I need different groups to show up and hide and not affect the rest of the layout. Okay, so this guy right here, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is that these alignments don't yet take into account, I don't know if this is something that's coming, but let's say we get a top and a bottom of 25 and nothing on the left. Sorry, top and left and nothing on the bottom or right. Well, it's not going to be centered, is it? Because it doesn't take into account, it takes into account the margins in its calculation, right? So it's not going to be centered. It's going to be centered if the margins work out for it. Play around with this, and it essentially gives you flexibility to create layouts that are relative to each other and where the children don't need to interact. But what if the children do need to interact? You have a complex layout and you have two groups and you want one on the left and one on the right, as long as they fit, right? Let's change this. Instead of align to parent, sorry, not the left and right, we're going to start with column top and bottom. Boom. So every time you add a group or an element of any type inside of a column container, they will stack, regardless of the amount of room that's available to the right. They will always be one on top of each other. Easy peasy. The other thing you can do with column containers is to apply gap spacing. So you can say every column I add, I want 16 pixels underneath. And every time you're going to add a new element, it'll automatically create that for you. Okay, so let's get rid of this. And let's say this time I want them to actually be able to align beside each other as long as there's room. And when there's no more room, I want them to collapse like this into a column style. You can use row, and row essentially allows, if there's enough space, to line up horizontally, and when there's no more space, but they have to drop down a little bit more. Okay, there's some weird behavior if you put it at the page level, but if you put it at because of the 100% thing that I talked about at the beginning of the video, so this one has a weird alignment. But if you group them together, group into a group container, into a row container, something similar will happen. Let's apply the gap spacing here, and let's say 16 again. And this time, so that's the row, that's the column gap. And you can also apply row gap spacing. And I think in this case, because they're grouped inside of a parent, it'll, oh, whoops. I gave it too much of a width here. Row, yes, yes. There's your min width. Let's remove these, and it should snap down when there's no more room. Pop, with the 16, like that. Pretty cool, eh? That's all 4 of the layouts with a few of the options that you have: gap spacing, column spacing. There's a few other things to check out, like space between or space around. And depending on your layout, you could play with those. And then you have your vertical alignment where you can stretch, make sure it's centered all the time, or make sure it's touching the bottom of its parent, which I won't go into too much detail in this video because I want to keep it short. It is a quick tips after all. If you enjoyed the video, please do a... I'm just going to cut it right there, aren't I?